A millionaire returns home early to a strange silence that precedes chaos. In his daughter's room, he finds the housekeeper fainted on the floor, while the little girl begs for help. What doctors reveal hours later shatters all the man's certainties about his own family. Behind the faint, a plot of cruelty and betrayal is hidden, exposing the darkest side of the mansion. The London sky was covered with heavy clouds on that seemingly ordinary Tuesday. Gregory Mendelssohn watched from the panoramic window of his office on the 30th floor of one of the most imposing buildings on the Strand. At 45, he had built a culinary empire that began with a small restaurant in Notting Hill and now boasted 27 establishments spread across the UK. The British Flavour network was recognized by the most discerning critics and adored by celebrities and politicians. As he adjusted his impeccably knotted Italian tie, Gregory sighed deeply. Something wasn't right. For weeks he had felt an inexplicable restlessness. It was as if a premonition followed him daily, whispering that he should pay more attention to what was happening inside his own home. The mansion in Kensington was a dream come true, built with the sweat of years of hard work. There he lived with his wife Veronica, a 35-year-old former model, and their daughter Marianne, just 3 years old, the most precious treasure in his life. To complete the family routine, they had the help of Constance Santos, a 30-year-old woman from rural Yorkshire, who had been working as a housekeeper at the residence for almost 2 years. "Mr. Mendelssohn, the meeting with the investors starts in 15 minutes, informed Patricia, his efficient secretary through the ajar door. Gregory nodded absently, still fixated on the grey sky. The rain began to fall, first in timid drops, then in furious cascades against the reinforced glass. "Patricia, call everyone and cancel. Say I had a family emergency. Reschedule for tomorrow, same time." The secretary stared at him in surprise. In 10 years of working together, Gregory had never cancelled a meeting with important investors. "Has something happened, sir?" "I don't know, Patricia, but I need to go home." The journey from the office to the mansion took 30 minutes, enough time for Gregory to reflect on the last few months. Veronica had been different, more distant, with a cold glint in her eyes that he no longer recognized. Family dinners had become silent, filled only by Marianne's occasional laughter, and Constance. She seemed to be wilting like a flower without water, thinner, paler, with deep dark circles under her eyes, a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. When the driver stopped before the majestic gate, Gregory dismissed the man and decided to enter alone. A decision that would change his life forever. The mansion was plunged into a disturbing silence, not the sound of pots and pans in the kitchen, nor the television on in the living room, nor the children's songs that Marianne loved so much. Just silence, and then, like a blade cutting the air, a desperate cry echoed down the hallway. Gregory's blood ran cold as he recognized his daughter's voice. He climbed the marble stairs 3 steps at a time, following the anguished sound coming from Marianne's room. It wasn't a tantrum or a cry for attention. It was a wail of despair, of someone pleading for help. As he violently threw open the door, he was faced with a scene that would be etched in his memory forever. Constance was collapsed on the floor, pale as wax, her lips dry, eyes closed. Marianne, his little daughter, was kneeling beside her, shaking the employee's inert body with her delicate little hands. "Auntie, wake up, please." "Don't go away," the girl sobbed, thick tears streaming down her red face. For a moment, Gregory was frozen in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. It was Marianne's pleading gaze that brought him back to reality. "Daddy, Auntie Constance won't wake up. Make her wake up." In seconds, he was beside Constance, checking her weak breathing and barely perceptible pulse. With trembling hands, he took out his mobile and called for an emergency. While he waited, he noticed how cold her skin was, as if all life had been drained from her body. "An ambulance is on its way, sir." Estimated time of arrival, 7 minutes, the operator informed him. Gregory hugged Marianne, who wouldn't stop crying, clinging to his neck. "Auntie Constance is going to be all right, sweetheart. I promise we'll take care of her." The girl sniffled, her little eyes swollen from crying. "She didn't eat her snack today, Daddy. I gave her my biscuit, but she said her tummy hurt." Those innocent words made Gregory frown. Constance hadn't eaten. Why? The fridge was always stocked, and she was the one who prepared the family's meals. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics acted with professional speed. They placed an oxygen mask on Constance's face and carefully transferred her to the stretcher. One of them, a middle-aged man with compassionate eyes, pulled Gregory aside while the others carried Constance to the ambulance. "Sir, how long has she been like this?" "I don't know. I just got home and found her passed out. Does she have any known medical conditions? Diabetes, low blood pressure?" Gregory shook his head, ashamed that he couldn't answer. He knew so little about the woman who cared for his home and his daughter. "I don't know. She never mentioned anything." The paramedic nodded, no judgment in his gaze. "We're taking her to St. Catherine's Hospital. You can follow us if you'd like." Gregory looked at Marianne, who was watching fearfully as the men took her Auntie Constance away. "I need a few minutes to arrange for someone to stay with my daughter." "I'll be right there." He called Mrs. Adelaide, a lady who lived next door and occasionally looked after Marianne when needed. She arrived in 15 minutes, time Gregory used to calm his daughter and change her tear-soaked clothes. "Marie, Granny Addie is going to stay with you while Daddy goes to see how Auntie Constance is, okay?" The girl nodded gravely, her eyes still moist. "Bring her back, Daddy, promise?" The lump in Gregory's throat tightened. "I promise." "Bye, love." On the way to the hospital, Gregory tried calling Veronica several times, but every call went to voicemail. Strange. She had mentioned she would be spending the day at the spa with friends, but she always kept her phone nearby. St. Catherine's Hospital was one of the most reputable in London. When Gregory arrived at the emergency room, he identified himself as Constance's employer and was told she was being attended to by the medical team. An hour passed before a serious-looking doctor, identified by her name tag as Dr. Lucy Barnes, called him into a private room. "Mr. Mendelssohn, I'm Dr. Barnes, responsible for Mrs. Santos's case. I need to ask you some important questions." Gregory nodded, apprehension growing in his chest. "The patient is stable now, but she arrived in critical condition. She's suffering from severe malnutrition, advanced dehydration, and acute hypoglycemia. Her body is in a state of starvation, as if she hasn't been eating properly for weeks, perhaps months." The doctor's words hit him like a punch to the gut. That's not possible. Constance works in my home where there's never a shortage of food." Dr. Barnes watched him intently, as if searching for signs of a lie on his face. "Mr. Mendelssohn, we also detected something else during the initial exams. The patient is pregnant, approximately 2 months along." The floor seemed to disappear from under Gregory's feet. Constance pregnant? How had he not noticed? "No, I didn't know." She didn't say anything. "What worries us is that in her current state, both she and the baby are at risk. We need to understand how an employee working full-time in a wealthy residence reached this point of malnutrition. This doesn't happen overnight, Mr. Mendelssohn." The accusatory tone was subtle, but it was there. Gregory felt his face burn. "Doctor, I swear I had no idea. Constance always seemed, well, at least until a few weeks ago. And my house has plenty of food. She prepares the meals for my family herself." "Prepares, but does she eat with you?" The simple question left him speechless. He really didn't know. On the rare occasions he had lunch at home during the week, he ate alone or with his daughter. On weekends, when the family gathered at the table, Constance was always busy in the kitchen, serving, never sitting with them. As he digested that disturbing information, the door to the room opened and a nurse appeared with an urgent expression. "Doctor, the patient in 114 has woken up and is extremely agitated. She's asking to speak with Mr. Mendelssohn immediately. She says it's a matter of life or," she hesitated, glancing at Gregory, "of extreme urgency." Dr. Barnes stood up. "Let's go, but only 5 minutes. She needs to rest." Constance was semi-reclined on the hospital bed, an IV drip attached to her skeletal arm. Upon seeing Gregory, her eyes filled with tears. The doctor and nurse discreetly stepped away, giving them a moment of privacy. "Mr. Gregory," her voice was just a hoarse whisper, "is Marianne okay?" His heart ached. Even in that state, her first concern was for his daughter. "Yes, Constance, she's safe with Mrs. Adelaide. She's very worried about you." A sob escaped her dry throat. "She's an angel, always sharing her snacks with me in secret." Those words landed like a bomb. "Constance, why did you need to eat in secret?" "My house has food for everyone." Her eyes widened in panic as if she had said too much. I can't, she murmured, looking away. Gregory moved closer, gently taking her fragile hand. What's happening in my house that I'm not seeing? Please tell me the truth. Constance closed her eyes, tears silently streaming down her hollowed cheeks. Mr. Gregory, I'm scared. So scared. Scared of what? Of whom? She swallowed hard, gathering her courage. Of Mrs. Veronica. She's doing terrible things to me. Gregory's blood ran cold. What kind of things? Constance looked around as if afraid of being overheard, and then whispered, There's a diary under Marianne's bed. I hid it there because it's the only place your wife doesn't touch. Please read it all. I also installed cameras around the house. They're hidden in a teddy bear in Marianne's room, in an artificial plant in the living room, and behind the photo frame on the chest of drawers in the hallway. Everything is recorded. I'm not making this up. The nurse returned, indicating that time was up. Before Gregory could process what he had just heard, Constance squeezed his hand with a surprising strength for someone so frail. Please, believe me, I just wanted to protect your daughter. As he watched her close her eyes, exhausted by the effort of speaking, Gregory felt he had just opened a door to a parallel universe, one where his perfect life was just a facade for horrors happening right under his nose. He left the hospital with a heavy heart and a mind in turmoil. One certainty accompanied him. He needed to find that diary and the cameras. He needed to discover what dark secrets his house held while he was away building culinary empires. The journey back home was the longest Gregory had ever taken. The rain had turned into a violent storm that battered London, as if the sky shared the turmoil that now dominated his thoughts. Constance's words echoed in his mind. She's doing terrible things to me. Veronica, his wife, the woman with whom he had shared his life for 8 years, the mother of his daughter. Could it be possible that behind that angelic face and refined manners hid a person capable of such cruelty? Upon arriving home, he found Mrs. Adelaide in the living room, Marianne asleep in her lap after an exhaustive cry. "How is she?" whispered the lady, stroking the girl's hair. "Stable but very weak," Gregory replied, omitting the more disturbing details. "Thank you for staying with Mary, Mrs. Adelaide. I can take her now." The lady nodded, helping to transfer the sleeping child into her father's arms. Before leaving, she touched Gregory's arm with a maternal gesture. "You know, Gregory, I've sometimes watched Constance from my window in the back garden. She always seemed frightened, looking over her shoulder as if she was afraid of being caught. I never said anything because I didn't want to seem like a nosy old woman, but please, Mrs. Adelaide, anything you've noticed, no matter how small, tell me." The lady sighed, adjusting her handbag on her shoulder. "Last week, I saw her rummaging through the kitchen rubbish and taking out something wrapped that looked like food. She ate it right there, quickly, like a starving animal. I found it very strange. A knot formed in Gregory's throat. The image described was so degrading, so inhumane, that he could hardly associate it with the luxurious environment of his home. Thank you for telling me. And please don't mention this to anyone for now." After putting Marianne in her bed, Gregory gently closed the door and knelt, looking under the small child's bed. At first he saw nothing, but as he stretched his arm to the very back, his fingers touched something solid. He pulled it out carefully. It was a simple blue hardcover notebook, the kind used by students. On the first page, in neat handwriting, it said, "For when I'm no longer here." The sentence made his heart freeze. He sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and began to read. March 10th, first day in this house. The family seems nice. Mr. Gregory barely stayed for the interview. He was busy, but Mrs. Veronica explained everything. The salary is good, better than I expected, and the little girl Marianne is an angel. I think I'll be happy here. The first few pages were daily accounts, observations about the routine, small joys with Marianne. But approximately 2 months after her arrival, the tone changed drastically. May 17th. Today Mrs. Veronica shouted at me for the first time. I accidentally broke a crystal vase while cleaning. She said it was a family heirloom, and that it cost more than I would earn in a year. She deducted it from my salary. I thought it was unfair, but I really need this job. Gregory continued turning the pages, each entry more disturbing than the last. June 30th. Mrs. Veronica now monitors what I eat. She said a housekeeper can't eat the same food as the employers, that I'm spending too much. She threw my packed lunch in the bin, saying it smelled bad, and that she didn't want poor people's food contaminating her kitchen. I went the whole day without eating. July 15th. Today I found out that Mrs. Veronica has been deducting fees from my pay. When I questioned it, she said it was for the wear and tear of furniture and utensils. She took half my salary. I can no longer send the money I promised to my sick mother in Yorkshire. August 2nd. Marianne gave me a piece of her cake today, in secret. God bless this child. Mrs. Veronica found out and made me clean the same bathroom 7 times in a row, saying she could see dirt that only refined eyes could see. As the dates advanced, the situation worsened exponentially. The humiliations became more frequent, more cruel. Veronica calling Constance ignorant, stupid and filthy northerner, and other unspeakable insults. Forbidding her from using the guest toilet, even when there were no visitors. Forcing her to work with a high fever. Then, in a September entry, a new character appeared in the drama. September 20th. Mrs. Veronica's brother, Mr. Richard, came to visit today. The way he looks at me gives me the creeps. She noticed and laughed, saying I was getting ideas. She said that men like her brother don't look at little housekeepers except to have a bit of fun. The tone she used terrified me. Gregory's heart raced. Richard, Veronica's younger brother, had been hired as the family's driver about 8 months ago. Gregory rarely saw him, as it was usually Veronica who used his services for shopping, social engagements, and taking Marianne to nursery. He continued reading, a growing sense of urgency. October 15th. Mr. Richard cornered me in the laundry room today. He said I was too pretty to be just a housekeeper. He tried to touch me, but I managed to escape when I heard Marianne calling for me. Thank God for that child. I didn't tell Mrs. Veronica anything. I know she wouldn't believe me. October 27th, it happened again. Mr. Richard followed me to the staff room. This time he was more aggressive. He said I was provoking him, and that it was only a matter of time. When I tried to leave, he blocked the door. I only managed to escape by promising I would think about it. I'm so scared I can barely sleep. Gregory felt the blood boil in his veins. The following pages detailed a progressive siege, a predator stalking its prey, and then an entry that made him turn pale. November 18th. I can't write about what happened today anymore. I don't have the strength. But I need to record it. Mr. Richard forced me. He took advantage of everyone being out. No one will believe me. Who are they going to believe? A poor housekeeper or the boss's brother? There was what he said before leaving my room, laughing. Tears streamed down Gregory's face. How had he not noticed? How had he allowed such atrocities to happen under his own roof? The following entries described Constance's growing despair upon discovering the pregnancy. Her terror when she told Richard, who threatened her if she revealed to anyone that the baby was his. January 10th. Mrs. Veronica found out about the baby. I don't know how. She called me a slut and said I planned it all to trap the family driver. When I tried to explain what really happened, she laughed in my face and said that housekeepers always try to seduce family men. She said that if I tell Mr. Gregory anything, she'll report me for theft and destroy my reputation, so I'll never get a job again. The reading continued, revealing a progressive hell. Veronica had begun to actively sabotage Constance's meals, throwing away her food, explicitly forbidding her from eating the house's food, checking to see if she brought any food from outside. And then the most recent entries, which made Gregory tremble with rage and horror. February 5th. Today I saw Mrs. Veronica putting something in my water bottle. She was crushing pills and mixing them into the water. She didn't realize I saw her. I threw the water away as soon as she left, but I'm terrified. Why would she do that? Does she want to? February 12th. I've been fainting frequently. I can't keep any food down. Mrs. Veronica smiles when she sees me like this. I think she's trying to make me lose the baby. I've started drinking water only from the garden tap, when no one is looking. I installed cameras that I bought with my last savings. I need proof. February 20th. Marianne is my only ally in this house. She brings me biscuits hidden from her mother. She hugs me when I'm sad. I'm afraid for her too. What kind of person is being raised by that woman? Today I decided to hide this diary under her bed. It's the only place Mrs. Veronica would never look. The last entry was from the previous day, February 25th. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I'm so weak I can barely stand. I'm afraid to fall, asleep and never wake up again. If something happens to me, I hope this diary and the camera recordings reach Mr. Gregory. He seems to be a good man, just blind to what's happening in his own home. God forgive me for not being stronger. Gregory closed the diary, his hands trembling, his face wet with tears. A mixture of anger, guilt, and despair consumed him. How could he have been so blind? How had he not noticed the silent suffering that was taking place while he spent entire days away, dedicated to his business? He stood up with determination. He needed to find the cameras Constance had mentioned. In Marianne's room, he examined each teddy bear until he found a white rabbit with a small hidden compartment in its back. Inside, a micro camera and a memory card. In the living room, he located the artificial plant she had mentioned, a pot of fake ferns on the sideboard. The camera was strategically placed among the leaves, almost imperceptible. Finally, the photo frame in the hallway, a picture of the smiling family on their last trip to Disneyland. What a bitter irony, Gregory thought. The happy family displayed in the picture was a sham, a mask for the cruelty that existed behind the scenes. With the 3 cameras in hand, Gregory went to his study and connected the devices to his computer. The images were clear with good audio quality. He began to randomly watch clips from the recordings. In the first video, he saw Veronica in the kitchen alone, crushing pills with the back of a spoon and mixing the powder into a water bottle labeled with Constance's name. The smile on his wife's face as she did this was disturbing, a mixture of pleasure and calculated malice. In another recording, Richard was sneaking into the staff room, while Constance's voice could be heard begging him to leave. "No one's going to believe you," he said with a cruel laugh. A third clip showed Veronica snatching a sandwich from Constance's hands and throwing it in the bin. "Do you really think you deserve to eat our food? You're paid to serve, not to be served." Scene after scene, revelation after revelation, Gregory's world collapsed. These people, his wife, his brother-in-law, were monsters disguised as civilized people, and he, in his detachment, had allowed them to practice their cruelties under his own roof. When his mobile rang, Gregory almost jumped out of his chair. "It was the hospital, Mr. Mendelssohn. This is Dr. Lucy Barnes. The patient, Constance Santos, has had a relapse. We need you to come to the hospital immediately. There are important decisions that need to be made." The doctor's grave tone made Gregory feel as if a cold hand were squeezing his heart. "I'm on my way now." He hung up and immediately heard the sound of the front door opening. Voices in the entrance hall, Veronica and Richard. They had returned. For a moment, Gregory considered confronting them immediately, unleashing all his accumulated fury, but the call from the hospital made him reconsider. Constance needed him now. With quick, quiet movements, he copied all the files from the cameras to his laptop, took the diary, and placed them in his briefcase. He took a deep breath, trying to compose a neutral expression, and went downstairs. Veronica was in the hall, taking off her rain-soaked coat. Richard was by her side, the car keys still in his hand. Upon seeing Gregory, Veronica's smile froze. "Darling, what are you doing home at this hour?" Gregory swallowed the bile that rose in his throat. This woman, whom he called his wife, had systematically tortured a person under his care, had tried to destroy a life, no, 2 lives, considering the baby Constance was carrying. "I had to come back early. Constance fell ill, she's in the hospital." Veronica's face showed no surprise or concern, just a slight discomfort, like someone interrupted by a minor inconvenience. "Oh, I hope it's nothing serious." Her voice was a study in indifference. "That girl has always been fragile. It's probably just for attention." Richard remained silent, but Gregory noticed his face had paled slightly. "I have to go back to the hospital now. The doctor just called." "Now?" "But we've just arrived and it's so late." "It's an emergency, Veronica." Gregory struggled to keep his voice calm. "Stay with Marianne. She's sleeping." Without waiting for a response, he grabbed the keys to his own car and walked out the door, not looking back. The rain continued to fall mercilessly, but he barely felt it. Inside his chest, an even more violent storm was brewing, a storm of irrevocable decisions that would need to be made as soon as he ensured Constance's safety. As he drove towards the hospital, a certainty crystallized in his mind. His life as he knew it was over. The empire he had built, the family he believed he had, the happiness he thought he possessed, it was all an illusion. The true reality was in Constance's frightened eyes, in the desperate pages of her diary, in the disturbing images captured by the hidden cameras. And now, with this truth in hand, he had a choice to make. Continue living the lie or face reality, no matter how painful it might be. St. Catherine's Hospital was quiet at that time of night. Only the occasional sound of medication trolleys and the constant beeping of equipment echoed through the brightly lit corridors. Gregory crossed the lobby with hurried steps, the briefcase held firmly under his arm, guarding the evidence that had turned his life upside down. Mr. Mendelssohn. Dr. Barnes was waiting for him in the fourth-floor corridor, her grave face revealing the seriousness of the situation. "Thank you for coming so quickly. How is she?" The doctor gestured for him to follow her into a small private meeting room. She closed the door before answering. "The patient suffered a severe cardiac arrhythmia. We managed to stabilize her, but her condition is worrying. The prolonged malnutrition has caused damage that could become permanent if we don't act quickly. Also," she hesitated, choosing her words, "we are monitoring the pregnancy closely. There is a significant risk to the fetus." Gregory sank into a chair, the weight of the situation crushing his shoulders. "I found evidence," and he said, opening the briefcase and showing her the diary. "My wife was systematically preventing Constance from eating. She was," his voice broke, "putting something in her drinks." Dr. Barnes's eyes widened. "This is extremely serious. Mr. Mendelssohn, we need to run toxicology tests immediately." "There's more." Gregory took a deep breath. "My wife's brother, who works as a driver for our family, abused her. The baby is his." The doctor put her hand to her mouth, shocked. "Mr. Mendelssohn, these are serious crimes. We have a legal obligation to report this to the authorities." "I know. And I will do so personally. But first I need to ensure Constance's safety." The doctor nodded, regaining her professional composure. "I can refer her to our social worker as soon as she's conscious. She can advise on protective measures. But right now our priority is the patient's physical health. I'll do whatever it takes. Cost is not an issue. I want her to receive the best possible treatment." "There is another matter, Mr. Mendelssohn." The doctor adjusted her glasses. "The pregnancy. Given the physical and psychological trauma, and considering the circumstances, some patients choose to terminate." Gregory felt a lump in his throat. It wasn't his decision to make, but he understood why the doctor was broaching the subject. "That is something only Constance can decide. My role is to ensure she has all the necessary support, whatever her choice may be." Dr. Barnes seemed to approve of his response. "I can see that you are genuinely concerned for her well-being." "That's a relief, considering what she seems to have been through. Can I see her?" "Yes, but she is sedated. She probably won't wake up until tomorrow morning." Gregory followed the doctor to the room where Constance was resting. The sight of her connected to machines, with her skeletal pale face, made his heart ache. How had he not noticed how much she was wasting away? What kind of employer, what kind of human being had he been to allow this to happen right under his nose? "I'll leave you for a moment," said the doctor, exiting discreetly. Alone with Constance, Gregory pulled up a chair and sat by the bed. He took her fragile hand in his. "Forgive me, Constance," his voice was just a whisper. "I swear I will fix this. Those responsible will pay for what they did. You and your baby will be safe, I promise." He didn't know if she could hear him, but he needed to say those words to make that commitment out loud. He stayed there, watching over her sleep, until a nurse gently suggested he go and get some rest. "It's going to be a long night, sir. We have your contact details, and will call if there are any changes." Gregory nodded, exhausted. As he left the hospital, he saw on the clock that it was already past midnight. He couldn't go back home, not now. He wouldn't be able to look at Veronica without revealing everything he knew, and he needed to be strategic. The safety of Constance and his own daughter depended on it. He drove to the Savoy a few blocks away. He needed a place to think, to plan his next steps. After checking in, he went up to his room and immediately called his personal lawyer. "Anthony, sorry to call at this hour. It's an emergency." On the other end of the line, the sleepy voice quickly became alert as Gregory explained the situation in general terms. "My God, Gregory. This is terrible. Come to my office tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'll call in a criminal law specialist to join us." After hanging up, Gregory tried to lie down, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Constance's skeletal face, heard Marianne's childish voice pleading, "Auntie, don't go away," and then the image of Veronica, his wife, smiling as she contaminated the water Constance would drink. Who was this woman he had married? How had he not noticed the cruelty that dwelled behind that beautiful face? The thought consumed him for hours, until finally, near dawn, he fell into a restless sleep. At 6 in the morning, his mobile rang, waking him abruptly. It was the hospital. "Mr. Mendelssohn? The patient, Constance Santos, is awake and asking to see you." Gregory jumped up, his heart racing. "Tell her I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, after a quick shower, he was back at the hospital. Constance was sitting up in bed, still visibly weak, but her eyes had a different glint, a spark of hope that wasn't there the day before. "Mr. Gregory." Her voice was firmer, though still hoarse. "Did you find—" "Yes, Constance." He took her hand gently. "I found the diary. I saw the camera recordings. I know everything." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to cause you any trouble. I swear I tried to endure it, but—" "No, Constance." Gregory interrupted her, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm the one who should be asking for forgiveness. I should have realized what was happening in my own home. What Veronica and Richard did," he swallowed hard, "is unforgivable, and I will make sure they pay for it." Constance looked down. "No one will believe me. I'm just the housekeeper. But we have proof." Gregory squeezed her hand lightly. "The diary, the recordings, and I believe you, Constance. I will be by your side every step of this process." She looked up, surprised. You're not going to fire me?" The question broke Gregory's heart. Even after everything, she still feared losing her job, being left without resources. "Constance, you will never have to worry about money or a job again. I will ensure you have everything you need. Medical treatment, a safe place to live, legal support. And I want you to know, you will always be welcome in Marianne's life. She loves you like family." Tears now flowed freely down the young woman's face. "Marianne, is she okay?" "Yes, she's worried about you. She wants her Auntie Constance back." A sob escaped Constance's lips. "I worry about her." "Your wife. She's not a good mother, Mr. Gregory. She shouts at the girl when you're not around, calls her stupid when she spills something. I tried to protect her as much as possible." Another revelation that struck Gregory like lightning. Not only Constance, but his own daughter was also a victim of Veronica's cruelty. The urgency to act increased exponentially. "I'm taking Marianne out of that house today, and you, Constance, will stay in the hospital until you're fully recovered. Afterwards, I have an apartment in Canary Wharf that was reserved for the company's foreign executives. You can stay there for as long as you need." She shook her head, still in disbelief at the sudden change in her situation. "And what about the baby?" she asked, instinctively placing a hand on her still flat stomach. Gregory hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "The decision about the baby is entirely yours, Constance. Whatever you choose, I will support you. If you decide to go ahead with the pregnancy, I guarantee that you and the child will want for nothing. Antenatal care, proper nutrition, everything. If you decide to terminate," he took a deep breath, "I will also understand and cover all necessary costs. The important thing is that it's your decision and yours alone." Her eyes, so accustomed to seeing cruelty, now reflected confusion in the face of unexpected kindness. I want this baby, Mr. Gregory, despite everything." "It's not his fault how he was conceived." Gregory nodded, respecting her decision. "Then we will do everything to ensure you have a healthy pregnancy from now on. The doctors are already aware of the situation." A nurse entered the room, informing them it was time for Constance's tests. Gregory said goodbye, promising to return later, and headed to his next destination, the law firm. The commercial building on the Strand was still partially empty when he arrived, shortly after 7 in the morning. Anthony Carter, his lawyer for over a decade, was waiting for him in the lobby, along with a woman of about 50, with a serious expression and a firm posture. "Gregory, this is Dr. Clara Fisher, a specialist in criminal law. I thought we would need her expertise." The three of them went to a meeting room. There, Gregory explained in detail everything he had discovered in the last 24 hours. showing the diary and selected clips from the footage. The lawyers listened with increasingly grave expressions. "This is extremely serious, Gregory," said Anthony when he had finished. "We're talking about multiple crimes: attempted poisoning, psychological torture, sexual abuse." Clara nodded, taking notes in her pad. "The material you have constitutes compelling evidence. The recordings especially are very clear. The diary by itself would be considered just a personal account, but with the support of the images, it becomes a crucial piece of the evidentiary puzzle." "What should I do now?" Gregory asked anxiously. "First, ensure the victim's safety, which you are already doing," replied Clara. "Second, file a formal police report. Third, apply for an emergency protective order to prevent your wife and brother-in-law from attempting any contact with the victim. In parallel, we will begin divorce proceedings with a request for sole custody of your daughter." Anthony added, "I strongly recommend that you do not return home, Gregory. The moment we formalize the complaint, your wife will be notified and the situation could become volatile. We will arrange for you to retrieve Marianne and your essential belongings with a police escort." The plan was meticulous and necessary, but the reality of the situation was still overwhelming for Gregory. In a matter of hours, his marriage, his family, the life he had built, everything would be irrevocably altered. And yet he knew it was the only possible path. "Do whatever is necessary. I want this resolved as quickly as possible, for the sake of Constance and my daughter." Dr. Fisher looked him in the eye, her tone firm but compassionate. "Gregory, I need you to understand. This will not be quick or easy. Your wife will likely fight tooth and nail. She will deny everything. Perhaps try to defame you, say you're having an affair with the housekeeper." She gestured, indicating possible tactics. "The judicial system is slow. Even with all this evidence, it could take months, perhaps years, for a final conviction." Gregory nodded, determined. "I don't care how long it takes. I won't give up." The three left the office with an established plan of action. The first stop would be the Specialist Domestic Violence Unit, where Gregory would present the evidence and formally file the report. Then, with the police report in hand, they would petition the judge for an emergency protective order and authorization to remove Marianne from the house with a police escort. On the way to the police station, Gregory received a call from Veronica. He showed the phone screen to Clara, who signaled for him to answer and put it on speakerphone. "Gregory, where are you?" Veronica's voice sounded irritated, with a superficial layer of concern. "You didn't come home last night. Marianne is asking for her father." "What's going on?" Following the lawyer's silent guidance, Gregory kept his response vague. "I've been at the hospital with Constance. She's very ill. For God's sake, Gregory, she's just a housekeeper. You're neglecting your family for an employee." The contempt in her voice was palpable, confirming everything Gregory had discovered. How could he have been so blind? "I'll be home in a few hours to pick up Marianne," he replied, keeping his voice neutral. "Pick her up? To go where?" "We have social commitments today, have you forgotten?" "The dinner at the Monteros." "Veronica, I have to go now." "We'll talk when I get there." He ended the call before she could protest. He looked at Clara, who nodded approvingly. "Very good. You didn't reveal your plans, didn't confront her. That's crucial right now." When they arrived at the station, they were met by Detective Rebecca Price, a middle-aged woman with piercing eyes that seemed capable of detecting lies instantly. Gregory repeated his story, now with a fluency that came from practice, while Clara presented the carefully organized evidence. The detective watched a few clips of the videos in silence, her expression hardening with each new scene. "In 20 years on the force, I'm still surprised by human cruelty," she said finally, "especially when it comes disguised as civility in luxury homes, perpetrated by people from good families." She began the procedures for formally registering the report and requesting the protective order. "We will need the victim's statement as soon as she is able, and it would be important to have a medical report detailing her state of health, especially if there are signs of poisoning. Dr. Lucy Barnes at St. Catherine's Hospital is aware of the situation and has already ordered toxicology tests," Gregory informed her. "Excellent." The detective made a few more notes. "Mr. Mendelssohn, from this moment on, your wife and her brother are officially suspects in serious crimes. We will summon them for questioning later today. As for removing your daughter from the house, I will request a team to accompany you as soon as we have the court order, which should be in the next few hours. As the formal procedures were completed, Gregory felt the weight of the sleepless night and the devastating revelations, but there was also a strange sense of relief. The truth, however painful, was coming to light, and with it, the chance for justice for Constance and protection for Marianne. When they left the station, the sun was already high in the London sky. A new day had begun, and with it a new chapter in the lives of everyone involved in this dark story. Gregory looked up at the blue sky, taking a deep breath. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long time, he felt he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. "Let's go get your daughter," said Clara, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you ready?" Gregory nodded. He was more than ready. He was determined. The police car parked discreetly half a block from the Kensington mansion. Gregory waited in his own car, accompanied by Dr. Fisher, while Detective Price and 2 officers approached. The judge had issued on an emergency basis both the protective order in favor of Constance and the authorization to remove Marianne from the residence. "Mr. Mendelssohn," said the detective, approaching the vehicle's window, "we're ready. Remember what we agreed. The objective is to remove the child and her essential belongings without confrontation. If your wife becomes aggressive or tries to stop you, let us handle the situation." Gregory nodded, his heart hammering against his chest. The thought of confronting Veronica, knowing everything he now knew, made his stomach turn. But he had to be strong for Marianne, for Constance. The group walked to the mansion's gate. Gregory entered the security code with trembling fingers. The immaculate garden, with its perfectly pruned rose bushes and the marble fountain in the center, now seemed a cruel irony, external beauty hiding the rot within. Before they could reach the main door, it swung open abruptly. Veronica appeared, impeccably dressed as always, in a navy blue silk dress that contrasted with her fair skin. Her eyes widened at the sight of the police officers, then narrowed as they focused on Gregory. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked, her voice controlled but with an underlying tremor of anger. The detective stepped forward, presenting the official documents. "Mrs. Veronica Mendelssohn, I'm Detective Rebecca Price. We are here with a court order to remove the minor Marianne Mendelssohn and her personal belongings from the residence. Mr. Gregory Mendelssohn has temporary custody of the child until the custody hearing." Veronica's face turned pale, then flushed red. "This is absurd." She turned to Gregory, her eyes flashing. "What are you doing? Have you gone mad?" "Ma'am," the detective interrupted, "I also have here a protective order in favor of Constance Santos, prohibiting you or your brother, Richard Alves, from approaching within 300 meters of her or attempting any form of contact." "Constance? The housekeeper?" Veronica's face twisted into a mask of disdain. "What are you talking about?" The detective maintained a professional but firm voice. "You're under investigation for serious allegations, including attempted poisoning, mistreatment, and other forms of abuse. Your brother is also being investigated for sexual abuse. You will both have the opportunity to give a statement and defend yourselves, but right now, our priority is to ensure the minor's safety." Veronica staggered slightly, leaning against the doorframe. For a moment, it looked like she might collapse. Then her eyes met Gregory's, and he saw something he had never noticed before. A cold, calculated, almost predatory look. "It was her, wasn't it?" she hissed. "That lying little housekeeper told you stories, and you, idiot that you are, believed her. Or is there something more? Are you sleeping with her, Gregory? Is that it?" "Veronica, I'm not going to discuss this now," he replied, keeping his voice firm. "Where is Marianne?" She stepped to the side, blocking the entrance. "My daughter isn't going anywhere. I'm calling my lawyer right now." "This is kidnapping." One of the police officers took a step forward, his hand on his holster as a warning. "Ma'am, we have a court order. Obstructing it could result in your immediate arrest." At that moment, a small, childish voice called out from inside the house. "Daddy?" Marianne appeared in the hall, wearing a little pink dress, her brown hair in messy pigtails. Upon seeing Gregory, her little eyes lit up, and she ran towards him, dodging past Veronica. "Daddy!" "You're back!" "Is Auntie Constance better?" Gregory knelt, opening his arms to receive his daughter. "Princess, He hugged her tightly, breathing in the scent of her children's shampoo. Auntie Constance is getting better, yes, but she still needs to stay in the hospital for a few more days. Marianne pouted, but soon brightened up. Can we take her flowers? And drawings? I made a drawing of her with me in the park. Of course we can, my love. Gregory smiled despite the lump in his throat. But right now, you and Daddy are going on a little trip. An adventure. We're going to pack some of your favorite clothes and toys, okay? The girl clapped her hands, excited by the idea of an adventure. Veronica, however, moved forward, trying to pull Marianne back. She's not going anywhere, she shouted, her facade of control completely gone. That was enough for the detective. With a gesture, she signaled for the officers to intervene. Mrs. Mendelssohn, step away from the child now. Veronica hesitated, her gaze wild. For a moment, Gregory feared she would do something drastic. But faced with police authority, she backed away, trembling with rage. Marianne, darling, Gregory said, keeping his voice calm so as not to scare his daughter. Show Daddy where your favorite things are so we can take them, yes? As he went up the stairs with his daughter, he heard Veronica shouting on the ground floor, alternating between legal threats and hysterical accusations. The detective seemed to be handling the situation with professional efficiency. In Marianne's pink and white bedroom, Gregory helped her select clothes, books, toys, and her inseparable plush rabbit. As the girl chose which dolls to take, he observed the children's room with new eyes. It was a beautiful space, but it looked more like a set from a decorating magazine than a room where a child actually lived and played. There were no drawings on the walls, no toys out of place, none of the creative chaos that usually accompanies childhood. Daddy, is Mummy angry? Marianne asked suddenly, her small voice worried. Gregory knelt again, meeting her at eye level. Mummy is upset right now, yes. But it's not your fault, understand? It's never, ever your fault. The girl nodded, but her eyes revealed an understanding beyond her 3 years. The understanding of a child who had already learned to walk on eggshells, to fear disproportionate reactions. Is Auntie Constance coming with us on our adventure? The innocent question almost broke Gregory. The bond between his daughter and Constance was clearly deeper and more significant than any bond Marianne had with her own mother. When she gets out of the hospital and is better, we'll talk about that, okay? Now let's finish packing your things. 20 minutes later, with 2 full suitcases, they went downstairs. The scene on the ground floor had changed. Richard was now present, having apparently arrived during the packing process. He looked tense, cornered, keeping his distance from the police officers. Veronica continued to protest, but now on the phone, presumably with her lawyer. Upon seeing his brother-in-law, Gregory felt a wave of anger so intense that it took all his self-control not to lunge at the man. This was the predator who had abused Constance, who had threatened her, who had gotten her pregnant against her will. He took a deep breath, remembering Marianne's presence. The detective noticed the tension and quickly positioned herself between Gregory and Richard. Mr. Mendelssohn, I suggest you take your daughter to the car now. We will ensure you leave without any trouble. Gregory nodded, grateful for the intervention. He picked Marianne up in one arm, holding one of the suitcases with the other. One of the officers stepped forward to carry the second suitcase. As they passed through the door, Veronica dropped the phone and ran towards him. You'll regret this, Gregory, she shouted, her face contorted. I'll destroy you. I'll tell everyone you're having an affair with that slut. No one will believe you. Gregory felt Marianne shrink in his arms, frightened by her mother's screams. He held her closer to his chest, protecting her. Veronica, think of our daughter, he said, his voice low but firm. Don't do this in front of her. For an instant, something seemed to waver in the woman's eyes, perhaps a flicker of maternal conscience. But it passed as quickly as it came. You're not getting away with this, she said, now in a controlled, almost whispering tone. I know things about you that could ruin everything you've built. Don't underestimate me. The veiled threat hung in the air between them. Gregory ignored it, moving forward with Marianne. The walk to the car seemed endless. When he finally settled his daughter in the back seat, Gregory felt as if he had run a marathon. Dr. Fisher, who had waited in the vehicle, helped adjust the girl's seatbelt. Hello. Marianne, the lawyer said with a gentle smile. My name is Clara. I'm a friend of your daddy's. "Hi," the girl replied shyly, still shaken by the scene she had witnessed. The detective approached the car window. "Is everyone all right?" Gregory nodded, unable to speak. "We'll escort you to your destination, just as a precaution. Your brother-in-law seems quite agitated, and we don't want any surprises." "Thank you, Detective." As the car pulled away from the mansion he had once called home, Gregory watched in the rearview mirror. Veronica and Richard were standing at the entrance watching his departure. Even from a distance, their anger was palpable. A shiver ran down his spine. The battle was just beginning. "Where are we going, Daddy?" asked Marianne, clutching her rabbit to her chest. "To a new safe place, Princess. A really nice apartment near Hyde Park. You're going to love it." In truth, their immediate destination was the Dorchester Hotel in central London. Gregory had booked a suite by phone while they waited for the court order. They would stay there for a few days, until he could properly prepare the apartment in Canary Wharf, the same one he had mentioned to Constance, large enough to comfortably accommodate a father and daughter, with a spare room that could serve for visitors. Or perhaps in the future for Constance if she wished. After settling into the hotel, Gregory called the hospital. Constance had improved significantly in the last few hours, eating properly for the first time in weeks. The preliminary toxicology tests had detected traces of blood pressure medication in her system, exactly as she had described in her diary. "We have concrete evidence of poisoning." "Mr. Mendelssohn," Dr. Barnes informed him, "this significantly strengthens the criminal case." "And what about the baby?" "The initial assessments are promising. The fetus seems resilient, despite the adverse circumstances, but we are monitoring it closely, of course." After hanging up, Gregory spent some time playing with Marianne, trying to maintain an atmosphere of normality despite the extraordinary situation. The girl, adaptable as children often are, was soon entertained exploring the luxurious suite, especially fascinated by the jacuzzi bath. That evening, after putting his daughter to bed, Gregory finally had a moment to process everything that had happened in the last 48 hours. His life had been completely turned upside down. The marriage he believed to be solid, though not always passionate, had been revealed as a facade for unimaginable cruelty. The wife he respected, if not deeply loved, had shown herself capable of calculated atrocities. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating with messages and calls from Veronica, which he systematically ignored, following his lawyer's advice. A few hours after they arrived at the hotel, messages from mutual friends and acquaintances began to arrive. Apparently, Veronica had already started her smear campaign, spreading the story that Gregory was having an affair with the housekeeper and had abandoned his family. Exhausted but unable to sleep, Gregory poured himself a whiskey from the minibar and walked to the panoramic window. The city of London stretched out before him, a sea of pulsating lights. Somewhere down there was the hospital, where Constance was fighting to regain her health. Elsewhere, the mansion in Kensington, where he had lived years of an illusory happiness. And somewhere beyond the visible horizon were his restaurants, the empire he had built with so much effort, an empire that now seemed so insignificant in the face of the magnitude of the human tragedy that had unfolded under his own roof. His phone rang again. He checked the number. It wasn't Veronica, but Anthony, his lawyer. "Gregory, we have a problem. I've just received a notification. Veronica has filed a countersuit, alleging parental alienation and kidnapping of a minor. She's also requesting a restraining order against you, claiming threats." Gregory almost dropped his glass. "That's absurd. I never threatened her." "We know that, but she's playing hardball. She's got an aggressive lawyer, Morris Tanner, known for his questionable tactics. They're trying to control the narrative, to turn you into the villain of the story. And what about the evidence we have? The diary, the recordings, they are still our greatest advantage. But be prepared. They will try to discredit Constance in every way possible. They'll claim she planted the cameras with malicious intent, that she forged the diary, that she's making up stories to get revenge for being fired. But she wasn't fired. They're building an alternative version of events, Gregory. And worse, Veronica has started giving interviews to tabloids. The story is leaking to the press. The ground seemed to be crumbling beneath Gregory's feet. The idea of exposing Constance, already so vulnerable, to the relentless scrutiny of the media was terrifying. How do we protect Constance from this? I've hired a security team for the hospital. No unauthorized person will be able to see her. As for the public narrative, perhaps it's time to consider a more proactive strategy. What do you suggest? An exclusive interview with a respectable journalist. Tell your side of the story. Show some of the evidence, with Constance's face blurred, of course. Establish yourself as the protector, not the villain. Gregory hesitated. The idea of exposing details of something so intimate and painful deeply bothered him. But if Veronica was determined to destroy his reputation, and by extension undermine Constance's credibility, I need to think about it, Anthony. And consult Constance. I won't do anything without her consent. Understandable, but don't take too long. In narrative wars, the one who attacks first usually has the advantage. After hanging up, Gregory checked on the sleeping Marianne. The girl was curled up in a fetal position, hugging her plush rabbit, the same position she used to sleep in at home. At least that hadn't changed. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching his daughter's serene face. How do you explain to a 3-year-old that her mother isn't the person she appears to be? How do you protect her from the horrors to come, the legal battles, the media exposure, the inevitable trauma? He gently stroked the girl's hair, making a silent promise. No matter what Veronica tried, no matter how dirty the battle got, he would protect both Marianne and Constance with every fiber of his being. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because it was the right thing to do. The first ray of morning sun found Gregory still awake, contemplating the dawn of a new day and a new life, a life he had never imagined for himself, but which he now embraced with unshakable determination. The truth had been revealed, and there was no going back. All that was left was to move forward, facing each obstacle with the courage Constance had shown in documenting her abuse, in fighting for her life and the life of the baby she carried. Amidst the turmoil, a certainty emerged. From the ashes of this tragedy, a new family could be born, unconventional, perhaps, but founded on respect, protection, and who knows, with time, even true love. 3 weeks had passed since the dramatic removal of Marianne from the Kensington mansion. Time, which used to flow at a predictable cadence for Gregory, now seemed simultaneously accelerated and suspended, as if he were living in 2 parallel dimensions, the frantic urgency of legal proceedings contrasting with the patient reconstruction of a new routine for his daughter. The apartment in Canary Wharf, previously intended for foreign executives, had been transformed into a welcoming home. Gregory had hired an interior designer to create an enchanted bedroom for Marianne, with walls in soft shades of lilac and yellow, a castle-shaped bed, and most importantly, ample space for her to truly be a child, easels for painting, low shelves with books within her reach, educational toys scattered in colorful baskets. On that Saturday morning, as he prepared pancakes for breakfast, a new skill he was developing, with increasingly less disastrous results, Gregory watched Marianne in the living room, concentrating on a giant jigsaw puzzle. The girl's adaptation to her new life surprised him daily. Yes, there were moments of confusion, questions about when they would return to the big house, why Mummy wasn't with them. But overall, she seemed to be flourishing in the new environment, more talkative, more cheerful, more free. "Daddy, when is Auntie Constance coming?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the pieces scattered on the floor. "This afternoon, Princess. Remember we talked about it yesterday?" Constance had been discharged from the hospital a week ago. The doctors had managed to reverse the malnutrition and dehydration, and both she and the baby were now out of danger. Following the established plan, Gregory had settled her in another of his apartments, smaller but equally comfortable, just 2 blocks away. A private nurse stayed with her during the day, ensuring her complete recovery, while a discreet security team monitored the building 24/7, necessary precautions. Considering the veiled threats that continued to surface, this would be Constance's first visit to the apartment, the first time she would see Marianne since the incident. Gregory noticed an almost teenage anxiety in himself at the prospect of the meeting. He had spoken to her on the phone almost daily, visited her a few times in the hospital, but always in formal medical or legal contexts. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Mendelssohn." "Mr. Anthony Carter is at reception. Please let him in." A few minutes later, his lawyer entered the apartment, carrying a folder of documents, Marianne ran to hug him. In recent weeks, Anthony had become a constant presence in their lives, and the girl adored him, especially after he once showed up with a finger-painting kit that was a huge hit. "Uncle Tony, come see my puzzle. I've already done the whole border." "Impressive, Miss Marianne," he exclaimed with genuine enthusiasm. "Soon you'll be solving cases like a detective." As the girl pulled him by the hand to show her progress, Gregory returned to the kitchen to finish breakfast. "Pancakes, Anthony? I'm getting good at this. Considering last week they looked more like burnt rubber, any progress is welcome," the lawyer laughed. "But I actually came to update you on recent developments." Gregory nodded, placing 2 pancakes on a plate for Marianne. "Marie, darling, your pancakes are ready. Why don't you eat while you watch a bit of cartoon?" "Daddy needs to talk to Uncle Tony." The girl agreed cheerfully, settling on the sofa with her plate and the remote control. Once she was entertained, the 2 men sat at the kitchen table far enough away to speak privately. "So, what's the news?" Gregory asked, pouring coffee for both of them. Anthony opened his folder, revealing a neat stack of documents. A mix of good and bad news. Where should I start? The bad first, always. Veronica has intensified the smear campaign. She gave an exclusive interview to London Elite magazine, painting herself as the victim of a conspiracy. According to her, you were having an affair with Constance for months and orchestrated this whole situation to get out of the marriage without having to divide your fortune. Gregory shook his head, incredulous at his ex-wife's audacity. "That's absurd. We have concrete proof, and that's why I'm not too worried about those specific allegations. They're easily refutable. The problem is she's mobilizing your social circle. Several mutual friends, business partners are taking sides, and without knowing the details of the evidence, many are inclined to believe her." Gregory felt a tightness in his chest. He knew there would be social consequences, but the speed at which old friendships were dissolving still surprised him. "How does this affect the legal process?" "Directly, not much. But indirectly, she's building social pressure. Some of your suppliers have received visits from Richard, suggesting they might want to reconsider partnerships with the British Flavour Network." "That's intimidation." "Technically, no. He didn't make explicit threats. He just expressed concern about the future stability of the business. Vague enough not to constitute a crime, but the message was delivered." Gregory ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. His restaurants were his professional achievement, the legacy he intended to leave for Marianne. The idea of seeing the empire he had built threatened by Veronica's vendetta was unbearable. "And the good news?" Anthony smiled for the first time since he had arrived. The full toxicology reports confirmed the presence, not only of blood pressure medication, but also of sedatives in dangerously high doses in Constance's system. Dr. Barnes was able to establish a pattern consistent with deliberate and progressive poisoning. This, combined with the camera footage showing Veronica tampering with the drinks, makes for an almost irrefutable case. And what about Richard? DNA was collected for the paternity test, as requested by the court. The results should be back in 2 weeks. But honestly, even without that, the recordings of him in Constance's room, the threats recorded on audio, it's a strong case. Gregory took a deep breath, feeling a slight sense of relief. And what about Marianne's custody? Here comes the best news. The family court judge assigned to the case, Judge Helen Vance, is known for her fierce commitment to child welfare. She has already reviewed the preliminary evidence and is deeply disturbed by Veronica's behavior. The custody hearing is set for next week, but we've already obtained a favorable report from the social services team that assessed Marianne. Gregory looked at his daughter, absorbed in her cartoons, oblivious to the legal storms raging around her. "She's really happier here," he murmured, more to himself than to the lawyer. "You know, Anthony, she hardly asks about her mother." "That's worrying, isn't it? How does a 3-year-old just accept her mother's absence without much suffering?" The lawyer followed his gaze, watching the girl thoughtfully. "It says a lot about the quality of the bond that existed. Children are perceptive, Gregory. They feel when they are truly loved and cared for. The fact that Marianne is adapting so well suggests that perhaps the relationship with Veronica was already distant." Gregory nodded, recalling Constance's words about how Veronica treated her own daughter. The guilt for not having noticed for having allowed Marianne to live in that toxic environment for so long, still gnawed at him. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," Anthony continued, pulling him from his thoughts. "The media strategy. The interview I suggested. I spoke to Constance about it yesterday. She's willing to authorize the use of some recordings, as long as her identity is protected. She doesn't want to appear, not even with her face blurred." "Understandable." "And you?" Gregory hesitated. The idea of exposing his private life to the media still repulsed him. But the alternative, allowing Veronica to control the narrative, could be disastrous for both the legal process and his business. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect Constance and Marianne." "Excellent. I have a journalist in mind, Lucy Mendez from The Times. Serious, ethical, known for investigative reports on domestic violence and abuses of power. Can we schedule it for next week?" Before Gregory could answer, the doorbell rang. Marianne jumped up from the sofa, her little face lighting up. "It's Auntie Constance," she shouted, running to the door. Gregory stood up, suddenly nervous, and walked to the entrance. On the security system screen, he saw Constance waiting in the hallway, accompanied by Clara Fisher, the criminal lawyer who now represented her specific interests. As he opened the door, he was met with a sight he almost didn't recognize. Constance was transformed. She was no longer the skeletal, pale, and frightened figure he had seen in the hospital. 3 weeks of proper nutrition, rest, and medical care had worked a miracle. Her warm skin had regained its healthy glow. Her dark hair, once dull, now fell in shiny waves over her shoulders. She wore a simple light blue dress that gently highlighted the small, incipient curve of her belly, almost 4 months pregnant. But what impressed him most was the change in her eyes. Once constantly downcast, evasive, they now met his directly, still with caution, but without the fear that had once dominated them. "Mr. Gregory," she greeted him with a slight smile. "Constance, I'm so glad you came. Please come in. And it's just Gregory, we've talked about this." Before he could say more, Marianne launched herself against Constance's legs, hugging her with all the strength her little arms could muster. "Auntie Constance, you're back. I made drawings for you. And for the baby, too. Daddy said you have a baby in your tummy. Can I see? Does it jump? Does it kick?" Constance laughed, a crystal-clear sound that Gregory realized he had never heard before, and knelt to properly hug the girl. "My little angel, how you've grown." She pulled back a little to get a better look at Marianne. "You look beautiful. And yes, I have a little baby in here." She pointed to her belly. "But he's still too tiny to kick or jump. In a few months you'll be able to feel it, I promise." As Marianne pulled Constance to show her the new room and her drawings, Gregory greeted Clara and invited her to join Anthony in the kitchen. The two lawyers quickly plunged into a technical discussion about the next procedural steps. Gregory found himself momentarily alone in the living room, listening to Marianne's laughter and Constance's soft voice coming from the children's room. There was something profoundly right about that sound, a harmony that had been missing in his previous home, despite all its architectural and decorative perfection. He walked to the hallway, stopping discreetly to watch the scene in the room, Constance sitting on the edge of the bed, examining with genuine interest each drawing Marianne showed her, asking questions, praising colors and shapes, completely present in the moment. The girl, in turn, radiated happiness, chattering non-stop, occasionally touching Constance's belly with almost religious reverence. "Is he going to be my little brother?" he heard Marianne ask, the innocence of childhood simplifying adult complexities. Constance glanced quickly towards the door, noticing Gregory's presence. Their eyes met for an instant, a silent question hanging between them. "The baby will be very special to all of us," she finally replied, choosing her words carefully. "And I'm sure you'll be a wonderful little friend to him or her." The answer seemed to satisfy Marianne, who soon turned her attention to showing off her favorite teddy bear. Gregory retreated silently, returning to the kitchen where the lawyers were discussing strategies. But his mind remained in the room, on the scene he had witnessed, on the possibilities that were beginning to take shape, not as a conscious plan, but as a diffuse sense of potential, of a future that, despite being born from tragedy, could contain its own unique beauty. Lunch was a surprisingly relaxed affair. Gregory had ordered food from the Ledbury, a restaurant specializing in contemporary British cuisine. The choice was not accidental. He knew Constance was from Yorkshire and thought that dishes with northern touches might please her. His intuition was correct. As she tasted a rich prawn and vegetable stew, her eyes lit up. "This reminds me of my mother's cooking," she commented, accepting a second helping. "She made the best savory fritters in York." "Did you used to cook back home?" Gregory asked, realizing how many basic things he still didn't know about her. Constance smiled, a nostalgic glint in her eyes. "I've been cooking since I was little. My mother sold treats at a market stall and I used to help. I always dreamed of having my own food business one day. Maybe a patisserie. I've always had a knack for sweets." This casual revelation opened a door to a deeper conversation, gradually between mouthfuls and occasional laughter from Marianne, who insisted on feeding her teddy bear little bits of food. Gregory began to truly get to know Constance Santos. He discovered that she had studied until she was 16, when she had to leave school to help support her family financially after her mother fell ill. That she loved to read, especially novels and cookbooks. That she had come to London at 25, seeking better opportunities, and that before working at the Mendelssohn Mansion, she had been a nanny for 3 different families, always with excellent references. "How did you end up working for us?" Gregory asked, realizing he hadn't even been part of the hiring process. "The employment agency recommended me. I interviewed with Mrs. Veronica, who liked my CV and the references from the other families." Constance hesitated, fiddling with her napkin. At first she seemed normal. Demanding, yes, but nothing out of the ordinary. Things only started to change after a few weeks. Gregory nodded, a knot forming in his throat. How could someone change so drastically? Or had the signs always been there, and he had simply chosen not to see them? "Daddy, can I have dessert?" Marianne's voice interrupted his dark thoughts. "Of course, Princess. We have creme caramel in the fridge. Can Auntie Constance serve me?" Constance smiled, clearly touched by the request. "It would be an honor. Miss Marianne." As the two went to the kitchen, Clara leaned towards Gregory, speaking in a low voice. "She's recovering well. Not just physically, but emotionally too. The sessions with the therapist are helping." "I'm glad to hear that," he replied sincerely. "But we have to be realistic, Gregory. The trial will be difficult for her. Reliving everything, facing her abusers in court. It will take immense strength. I'll be by her side every step of the way. I know you will. But there's something we need to discuss." The lawyer hesitated, choosing her words. "The role you will have in her life. And the baby's. In the long term." Gregory suddenly felt uncomfortable. It was a question he himself had been avoiding, navigating day by day without thinking too much about the future. "What do you mean exactly?" "I'm asking if you've thought about how involved you plan to be in their lives after all this is over. Because we're talking about years, Gregory. Not just as an employer or a temporary benefactor, but as—" She left the sentence unfinished, but the meaning was clear. Before he could answer, Constance and Marianne returned with the dessert. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Clara's question remained lingering in Gregory's mind for the rest of the afternoon. When it was time for Constance to leave, Marianne didn't want to let her go. "Stay longer. Please, we can watch Frozen." "Auntie Constance has never seen it," Gregory intervened gently. "Auntie Constance needs to rest, but she can come back another day." "Can't you, Constance?" Their gazes met again, something undefinable passing between them. "Of course I can, little angel. I promise I'll be back soon." "Tomorrow?" All the adults laughed at the girl's insistence. "Soon, Marianne," Gregory promised. "Now give her a goodbye hug." After Constance and Clara left, Gregory spent the rest of the day with Marianne, watching the promised Frozen. Having simple sandwiches for dinner, his culinary repertoire was still limited, and finally putting her to bed. Sitting in the armchair in his daughter's room, watching her fall asleep, he finally allowed himself to consider Clara's question. What would his role be in the lives of Constance and the baby after the legal storm passed? What kind of future could they build from the ashes of this tragedy? He didn't have definitive answers yet, only a growing certainty. The sense of rightness, of peace he felt seeing Constance and Marianne together was not accidental. There was something fundamentally right about that configuration. like pieces of a puzzle finally finding their places. His mobile vibrated in his pocket. A message from Anthony. Lucy Mendez can interview you on Monday, 10 a.m. Shall I confirm? Gregory looked once more at the sleeping Marianne, at the apartment that was beginning to transform into a real home, and thought of Constance, carrying an innocent life that deserved a bright future, free from the shadows of the past. Confirm, he replied. It's time to tell our story. The lights of the BBC 4 studios were more intense than Gregory had imagined. Sitting in the dark leather armchair, he discreetly adjusted his tie while watching the journalist Lucy Mendez organize her notes. The original plan for a print interview had evolved into something bigger, a 30-minute special on the program Direct Connection, known for its impartial investigative journalism. We're on air in 1 minute, announced the director. Gregory took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the key points he had discussed with Anthony and Clara. The strategy was clear. Be honest, show the most compelling evidence, but protect Constance's dignity and Marianne's privacy. No sensationalism, just the documented truth. 3, 2, 1. The red light on the camera lit up. Good evening, viewers. I'm Lucy Mendez, and this is a Direct Connection special. Tonight we speak with businessman Gregory Mendelsohn, owner of the renowned restaurant chain The British Flavour Network, about a case that has shocked London's high society and raised serious questions about domestic abuse in privileged environments. She turned to him. Mr. Mendelsohn, thank you for accepting our invitation. The pleasure is all mine. Lucy, this is a difficult story to tell, but a necessary one. The journalist nodded, her face expressing professional seriousness. Let's start at the beginning. Approximately 2 months ago, you found your housekeeper, Constance Santos, unconscious in your home. What did you discover from that point on? For the next 20 minutes, Gregory recounted the events with clarity and dignity. The discovery of the diary, the hidden cameras, the systematic abuse perpetrated by Veronica and Richard. The production showed selected clips from the recordings, with Constance's face and voice duly protected by technical means, but clearly showing Veronica putting substances in the housekeeper's water, Richard making threats, the insults, the humiliations. Toxicology tests confirmed the presence of blood pressure medication and sedatives in her system, Gregory explained. Substances that, in progressively increased doses, could cause serious health damage, especially considering she was pregnant. Lucy frowned, looking directly at the camera. What we are seeing and hearing is disturbing, but your ex-wife claims that you are having an affair with the employee and fabricated this evidence to avoid sharing assets in the divorce. How do you respond to that? With facts, Lucy. First, the dates. The cameras were installed months before I discovered anything. Second, independent medical reports prove the severe malnutrition and the presence of the substances. Third, there has never been any romantic relationship between me and Constance. His voice became firmer. We are talking about a young woman who was systematically abused under my own roof, while I was too busy with my restaurants to notice. My only motivation now is to ensure justice and reparation. And what about your daughter, Marianne? How is she coping with all this? Gregory's expression softened. Children are resilient when they feel safe and loved. She has adapted to the new routine, is attending child therapy, and receiving all the necessary support. What worries me most is protecting her from media exposure and ensuring she grows up in a healthy environment. At the end of the interview, Lucy asked the question many were wondering. What do you hope for the future, Gregory? For you, your daughter, and for Constance? He hesitated briefly, aware of the weight of each word. I hope for justice. I hope the system works as it should, protecting the vulnerable and holding aggressors accountable, regardless of their social or economic status. Personally, he smiled slightly, I'm rediscovering what really matters in life. And it's much simpler than I imagined. The red light went off. Lucy extended her hand, shaking his firmly. That was powerful, Gregory. Thank you for your courage. As he left the studio, he found Anthony waiting in the corridor. How did it go? The lawyer asked. Honestly? I don't know. I just hope I did the right thing. You did. And the first reactions are already coming in. Anthony showed his mobile where notifications were popping up. The hashtag Justice for Constance is exploding on social media. The next morning, the impact was undeniable. The interview had become the most talked-about topic in London's social and media circles. Newspapers ran headlines like, "Businessman reveals," "Abuse in luxury mansion and high society," "Scandal," "The shocking evidence of the Mendelssohn case." The most impactful, clips from the recordings circulated on the internet, always with Constance's identity preserved, but clearly showing Veronica's actions. The tide was beginning to turn. In the apartment, Gregory was preparing breakfast when his phone rang. It was Clara. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. "Some of it. It seems we've managed to get their attention." More than that. The Times published a special report interviewing 3 other former employees of Veronica's, all reporting similar patterns of abuse. And the best part, her defense is crumbling. Morris Tanner, that aggressive lawyer, has dropped the case. Apparently he didn't like discovering his client had lied to him about the evidence. The news was better than Gregory could have hoped for. Without a heavyweight lawyer, Veronica's strategy of controlling the narrative was compromised. And Richard? Here comes the cherry on top. He's negotiating a plea deal. He wants a reduced sentence in exchange for confirming everything, the attempted poisoning, the abuse, everything. It seems the two are not so united anymore. After hanging up, Gregory felt a mixture of relief and caution. It was a significant breakthrough, but the battle was far from over. The case would still have to go through due legal process, with all its complexities and potential twists. 2 weeks later, Marianne's custody hearing confirmed Gregory's temporary custody, based on the social services reports and the accumulated evidence against Veronica. The judge ordered supervised fortnightly visits for the mother, a commitment that, to everyone's surprise, Veronica showed no interest in fulfilling. Apparently, now that her public image was in tatters, motherhood no longer seemed a convenient role for keeping up appearances. Constance's visits became part of the routine at the Canary Wharf apartment. Initially twice a week, they soon became almost daily to Marianne's delight. Constance's belly grew healthy and round, marking the progress of a pregnancy that, despite the traumatic circumstances of its conception, was now surrounded by care and positive expectations. One Sunday afternoon, while Marianne was taking her nap after a lively lunch, Gregory and Constance were talking on the balcony, watching the activity in Hyde Park in the distance. "The trial has been set for next month," he commented, pouring passion fruit juice for both of them. Constance nodded, her hand instinctively resting on her 6-month belly. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Having to see them again, tell everything." "You're not alone." Gregory covered her hand with his, a comforting gesture that had become natural between them. "And with Richard's plea deal, the chances are good. I still can't believe She shook her head, unable to finish the sentence. "Rats desert a sinking ship." Gregory's voice hardened. "He's only thinking about saving his own skin." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the distant sounds of the city and the occasional song of a robin that had nested in the tree near the balcony. "Gregory?" Constance broke the silence, her voice hesitant. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course. What happens after? I mean, after the trial, when all this is over?" It was the same question Clara had raised weeks ago, the same one that occupied Gregory's thoughts in the quiet hours of the night. "What do you want to happen?" He returned gently. Constance lowered her eyes, her fingers playing with the rim of the glass. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about opening a patisserie. It's always been my dream. Maybe with the compensation from the lawsuit, I could start something small. A place where my son and I can rebuild our lives with dignity." "That's a wonderful plan," Gregory replied sincerely. Then, after a brief hesitation, he added, "And what if I wanted to be part of that new beginning?" Constance's eyes lifted, meeting his with a mixture of surprise and something else, something that made Gregory's heart race. "What do you mean?" "Constance, these weeks have been transformative. Seeing you with Marianne, the happiness you bring each other, the way our life together has flowed." He took a deep breath. "I'm not proposing anything rash. I know you're recovering from deep trauma, that you need space to heal your wounds. I just want you to know that, if you want it, there's a place for you and your baby in our lives, not as an employee nor as a temporary ward, but as a partner, a friend, maybe one day something more." The words hung between them, laden with possibilities. Constance's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I'm scared," she confessed. "Scared to trust, to believe that something so good could be real." "After everything," Gregory nodded, understanding. "There's no rush. We have time." He smiled, trying to ease the intensity of the moment. "Besides, you still haven't proven that you really know how to make the best chocolate truffles in London." "As you claim," she laughed, and the sound of her laughter, increasingly frequent, increasingly free, warmed his heart. "Is that a challenge, Gregory Mendelssohn?" "Definitely." The sound of little footsteps interrupted the conversation. Marianne appeared at the balcony door, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Auntie Constance, is the baby awake yet?" she asked, approaching to touch the prominent belly. "He's wide awake, little angel." "Want to feel?" The girl placed her small hand on the indicated spot, and her eyes widened as she felt a gentle movement under the skin. "He moved!" she exclaimed, amazed. "Daddy, Daddy, come feel." Gregory hesitated, looking to Constance for permission. She nodded, a small smile on her lips. Carefully, he placed his hand on her belly, exactly where Marianne was pointing. Seconds later, he felt it, a slight jolt, an affirmation of life. "Hello, little one," he murmured, surprised by the emotion that washed over him. The three remained like that, connected by that moment of pure intimacy, until Gregory's phone interrupted the scene. It was Anthony. "Gregory, important news. Richard is giving his statement right now, and it's more serious than we thought. He's confirmed that Veronica wasn't just trying to induce a miscarriage. The plan was to eliminate Constance slowly, to make it look like a complication of the pregnancy. And there's more. They found records of 2 other housekeepers who worked for Veronica before Constance, both of whom left with unexplained health problems. We're expanding the investigation." The gravity of the revelations hit Gregory like a physical blow. Constance noticed the change in his expression. "What is it?" He hung up, trying to process what he had just heard. New evidence. He looked at Marianne, deciding not to go into detail in front of the child. Good for the case, but disturbing. Constance understood immediately, the shadow of the past briefly clouding her eyes. "Marianne, why don't we go make those little biscuits you like so much?" she suggested, getting up with some effort due to her belly. "Your daddy needs to make some work calls." The girl agreed cheerfully, instantly forgetting the subject at the thought of biscuits. As the two headed to the kitchen, Gregory watched them, pensive. Anthony's revelation was a grim reminder of the real danger Constance had faced, of the providential luck that had been his return home on that fateful Tuesday. When he returned to the living room after a few necessary calls, he found the kitchen transformed, flour scattered on the counter, Marianne with her face dotted with chocolate, Constance laughing as she tried to clean up the mess they were making together. The scene was the perfect opposite of the impeccably sterile mansion in Kensington. It was imperfect, messy, authentic. It was a home. In that moment, between the aroma of vanilla and the sound of laughter, Gregory knew with absolute certainty, regardless of the outcome of the approaching trial, regardless of the challenges the future would surely bring, this was the family he was choosing for himself, not out of obligation or guilt, but because of a deeper bond, forged through unimaginable adversity and sustained by a courage he was only now beginning to fully comprehend. The real test, however, was yet to come. In a few weeks they would face Richard and Veronica in court, bringing to public light the full extent of their crimes. It would be a confrontation that would demand strength, not only from Constance but from all of them. And yet, seeing the woman who had emerged from the ashes of so much suffering now smiling as she taught his daughter how to shape biscuits, Gregory felt a quiet confidence that together they would be able to face anything. The Old Bailey was buzzing with activity on that Tuesday morning. Journalists crowded the entrance, cameras pointed at the arrival of those involved in what the press was already calling the Mansion of Horrors case, a sensationalist headline Gregory detested, but which reflected the public interest the case had aroused. When the official car parked at the side entrance, protected by security, Constance squeezed Gregory's hand tightly. Wearing a discreet navy blue dress that partially concealed her 7.5-month belly, she breathed methodically, applying the techniques her therapist had taught her to control her anxiety. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She nodded, determination visible in her eyes. Let's get this over with once and for all. Clara and Anthony were waiting for them at the entrance, along with the prosecutor in charge of the case, Patricia Monroe, a woman in her early 40s known for her tenacity in domestic abuse cases. "Good morning," the prosecutor greeted them. "The defendants are already in the waiting rooms with their lawyers. The judge has ordered them to enter the courtroom separately to avoid any communication between them." "And how are spirits?" Anthony asked. Richard is visibly nervous. He made a plea deal, but he knows he won't escape a significant sentence. Veronica, on the other hand, the prosecutor frowned, maintains a haughty posture. She's changed lawyers again. Now she's with Dr. Paul Stevens, a jury trial specialist. Gregory felt Constance stiffen beside him. Paul Stevens was famous for his aggressive tactics, especially in discrediting witnesses. "Don't worry," Clara assured her. "We're prepared. The evidence is solid, and you've been through all possible cross-examination simulations." The corridors of the courthouse were a labyrinth of tension and expectation. As they passed one of the waiting rooms, Gregory caught a glimpse of Richard, head down, prematurely aged by the stress of the past few months. The man looked up for a moment, meeting Gregory's gaze, and quickly looked away, unable to hold eye contact. The courtroom was already packed when they entered. Journalists, law students, onlookers, all drawn by the case that exposed the dark side of the London elite. The judge, Helen Campbell, a woman in her 60s with a stern expression, was already in her place. The minutes that followed were a blur of procedural formalities. Veronica's entrance caused a murmur in the audience. Impeccably dressed in a light grey suit, her hair perfectly styled, she looked ready for a photo shoot, not a trial for attempted murder. Her gaze briefly crossed with Gregory's, a mixture of hatred and contempt that made his stomach churn. When the session officially began, the prosecutor opened with a detailed and methodically constructed presentation of the facts. "Your Honor, what we have here is not an isolated case of mistreatment. What we have is a systematic pattern of abuse, psychological torture, and a deliberate attempt to eliminate a human being and the child she was carrying. The evidence was presented in devastating sequence, the most impactful clips from the camera recordings, Constance's meticulous diary, the toxicology tests revealing the presence of dangerous substances in her system, the medical reports documenting her state of malnutrition, the testimonies of former employees reporting similar abuses. Richard's testimony, now officially a cooperating witness, came next. With a trembling voice and eyes fixed on the floor, he confirmed everything: the abuse against Constance, the threats, and, most shockingly, Veronica's deliberate plan. She said she needed to get rid of the housekeeper because she knew too much. She said she was increasing the doses of the medicine slowly to make it look natural when it happened. Veronica remained impassive during her brother's account, but her fingers drummed nervously on the defense table, the only indication of her inner turmoil. When it was Constance's turn to testify, Gregory's heart ached. She walked slowly to the designated chair, her prominent belly evidence of the life growing inside her, a life conceived in tragic circumstances, but which now symbolized her own resilience. In a clear, firm voice, Constance recounted every detail of the abuse she had suffered. She spoke of Veronica's progressive cruelty, the shame and fear that had prevented her from asking for help sooner, the terror of each day in the mansion. "I installed the cameras because I knew no one would believe my word against hers," she explained. "A housekeeper from the north, against a respected socialite from the London elite. I needed concrete proof." When Veronica's lawyer began the cross-examination, the tension in the room grew perceptibly. "Mrs. Santos, you claim you were prevented from eating properly, correct?" began Dr. Stevens, his tone falsely cordial. "Yes, sir. However, you prepared the family's meals. Couldn't you have simply eaten when you were alone in the kitchen?" Constance maintained her composure. "Mrs. Veronica installed cameras in the kitchen specifically to monitor me. I knew this because she showed them to me herself, as a threat. She said she would know if I stole food." The lawyer changed tactics. "Were you in a relationship with Mr. Gregory Mendelssohn?" "No, sir. My relationship with him was strictly professional." "And now?" he insinuated with a calculated smile. Clara stood up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant and an attempt to defame the witness. Sustained, the judge replied dryly. Dr. Stevens, stick to the facts relevant to the case. The lawyer continued for a few more minutes, trying to find contradictions or weaknesses in Constance's testimony, but she remained consistent and precise. When she finally returned to her seat, Gregory realized he had been holding his breath throughout the entire interrogation. You were incredible, he whispered as she sat down. The closing argument stretched into the afternoon. The prosecutor was relentless. What we have seen here today, Your Honor, is the exposure of a calculated cruelty disguised as sophistication. Worse still, we have seen how social privilege can create a sense of impunity so profound that it allows someone to consider the life of another human being disposable. Mrs. Veronica Mendelssohn not only psychologically abused her employee and allowed her brother to assault her, but she coldly planned to eliminate two human beings, Constance and the baby she carries. Veronica's lawyer tried one last gambit. Your Honor, what we have is a case of an ambitious young woman who, upon becoming pregnant by her employer's brother-in-law, saw an opportunity for social advancement. The alleged evidence was clearly manipulated with the aim of extorting the Mendelssohn family. My client is, in fact, the real victim here. The judge announced she would retire to deliberate, with the verdict expected the following morning. As they left the courthouse, protected by the security team from the insistent flashes of photographers, Gregory felt emotionally drained. How are you? He asked Constance once they were finally safe in the car. Strangely, at peace, she replied, stroking her belly. I finally got to say everything, looking her in the eye. No matter what happens now, I've already achieved what I needed most: to be heard, to be believed. That night was tense in the apartment. Marianne, who had been in Mrs. Adelaide's care during the trial, sensed the adult's anxiety without fully understanding it. Is Auntie Constance sad? She asked Gregory as he tucked her into bed. No, Princess. She's just tired. Tomorrow will be an important day for all of us. The girl nodded with the seriousness she sometimes displayed, surprising for her age. Are we all going to be together forever after tomorrow? The question, as simple and direct as only a child could make it, caught Gregory by surprise. Would you like that? Yes, she replied promptly. Auntie Constance makes the best biscuits, and the baby is going to be my little brother, and you smile more when she's here. From childhood simplicity, the deepest truth, Gregory kissed his daughter's forehead, moved by her innocent yet accurate perception. We'll see what happens, okay? Now sleep. We'll have news tomorrow. After putting Marianne to bed, he found Constance on the balcony, watching the city lights. They stood in silence for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Marianne just asked me if we're all going to be together after tomorrow, he finally commented. Constance smiled, without taking her eyes off the nightscape. And what did you say? That we'll see what happens. He hesitated, then continued. But the truth, Constance, is that I want that. I want to build something real with you, not out of guilt or obligation, but because these months have shown me a possibility of happiness I never imagined. She turned to face him, her eyes shining. I've been thinking a lot about that too. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. About new beginnings, about trusting again. It's not easy after everything. But when I'm with you and Marianne, I feel like maybe it's possible. One step at a time. Gregory took her hand gently. One step at a time, he agreed. That night, for the first time, Constance did not return to her apartment. She slept in the guest room at Marianne's request, who insisted on telling her a bedtime story. A simple arrangement that somehow seemed to foreshadow deeper changes. The morning arrived with an urgent call from Clara. You need to come immediately. There's been a new development. At the courthouse, they discovered the reason for the urgency. During the night, Richard had attempted to take his own life in the cell where he awaited the verdict. He had been found in time by the guards and taken to the hospital, where he remained under observation. He left a letter confessing everything in even more explicit detail, the prosecutor explained. Apparently, the weight of guilt became unbearable. The letter has been added to the case file. The news shook everyone, especially Constance. As much as Richard had committed unforgivable atrocities, the idea of someone reaching such an extreme of despair was deeply disturbing. When the judge returned to the courtroom, the silence was absolute. Her face revealed nothing as she arranged the papers before her. After carefully reviewing all the evidence presented, the witness testimonies, and considering the detailed confession of the defendant, Richard Alves, she began, her voice reverberating in the silent room. This court finds the defendants guilty of all charges. A murmur went through the audience, quickly silenced by the judge. Richard Alves, represented here by his lawyer, considering his plea agreement and mitigating circumstances, is sentenced to 8 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 1/3 of the sentence. She turned to face Veronica, who for the first time seemed to have lost her composure, her face pale, her hands trembling. Veronica Alves Mendelssohn, this court sentences you to 12 years in prison in a closed regime for the crimes of attempted qualified homicide, assault, psychological torture, and aggravated moral damages. Additionally, it orders the payment of compensation in the amount of £1,800,000 to the victim, Constance Santos. The sentencing continued, detailing the specific conditions and other legal determinations, but Gregory barely heard. He watched Constance, who kept her eyes fixed on Veronica, not with hatred or triumph, but with an almost compassionate serenity, like someone finally freed from a burden too heavy to bear. As Veronica was led away by the court officers, she looked back one last time, her gaze meeting Gregory's. For a brief moment, he glimpsed something beyond the anger and arrogance, perhaps a flicker of understanding of what she had lost, of who she really was. Then she disappeared through the side door, leaving their lives hopefully forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited eagerly. Clara suggested a brief statement to close the matter once and for all. Just thank the justice system and ask for respect for your privacy from now on. In front of the cameras, Gregory spoke briefly. We are relieved that justice has been served. Now we ask for respect for our privacy as we try to rebuild our lives and look to the future, not the past. 2 years later, Marianne's patisserie, in the heart of Shoreditch, was particularly busy on that Saturday morning. The aroma of fresh bread and freshly baked pastries filled the cozy atmosphere, decorated in shades of blue and yellow, with small wooden tables strategically placed throughout the space. Behind the main counter, Constance supervised 2 employees while finishing an elaborate birthday cake. Her hair, now longer, was tied in a practical bun, and the white apron stood out against her warm skin. The bell on the door chimed, announcing new customers. She looked up, an immediate smile lighting up her face when she saw who was entering. "Mummy!" shouted a little boy of 1.5, running awkwardly towards her, his little arms outstretched. Constance quickly came around the counter, bending down to receive little Michael in her arms. "My prince!" "Did you miss me?" The boy nodded energetically, his eyes identical to hers, shining with joy. Right behind, Gregory entered, carrying Marianne, now 5.5, on his shoulders. "The clown was so funny, Mummy," the girl exclaimed, referring to the children's show they had just watched. "She did magic tricks with bunnies." Constance smiled, hearing Marianne call her Mummy, a recent and spontaneous development that still moved her every time it happened. The official adoption had been finalized just 3 months earlier, after 2 years of a relationship that had naturally evolved from friendship to love, from gratitude to true partnership. The golden wedding band on her left ring finger shone under the patisserie's lights, a simple registry office ceremony, followed by an intimate party in the garden of the apartment. Now officially home to the 4 of them. "How's business?" Gregory asked, leaning in to kiss her softly. "Hectic, as always on Saturdays. I just finished the order for the culture secretary's daughter's birthday. We're becoming the favorite patisserie of the establishment, you know." The success of Marianne's patisserie had surprised even Constance. What had started as a small business, funded by the compensation money, had quickly gained fame in the city, attracting a loyal clientele and even attention from specialized food magazines. Gregory, who continued to manage his restaurant chain with renewed success, supported his wife's venture with pride, but deliberately stayed out of the day-to-day decisions. This was Constance's dream, her achievement, her professional rebirth. "Table and Home magazine called again," he commented. "They want to do a special feature on you for the Christmas issue. From housekeeper to businesswoman of the year, The Incredible Journey of Constance Santos. She shook her head, still uncomfortable with the media attention. I don't want to be defined by my past or what I suffered. I'd rather they talk about my pastries, about what I've built, not what I've overcome. Gregory nodded, understanding. In the 2 years since the trial, they had established clear boundaries with the press. The story of the mansion case had eventually cooled down, replaced by new scandals, new tragedies, allowing them to live in relative privacy. Little Michael, tired of being held, wriggled to get down, running to join his sister, who had already settled at a small table in the corner, specially reserved for children. "Are we having chocolate truffles today, Mummy?" Marianne asked, her eyes pleading. "Of course. I just made a special batch." Constance smiled at her adopted daughter, marveling at how her heart had expanded to embrace her with the same unconditional love she felt for Michael. While the children were entertained with the coloring books available at the table, Gregory pulled Constance to a more private corner. "I have a surprise for you," he said, his eyes shining with anticipation. "What? Remember that plot of land we saw in Richmond? With the old house and the huge garden?" Constance nodded, recalling the property they had visited weeks ago, a charming place they both loved, but which was off the market due to an inheritance dispute. "I got it," he announced triumphantly. "The dispute was resolved and I closed the deal yesterday. We can start the renovations next month if you want." Her eyes filled with tears. The idea of a house with space for the children to grow, a garden where they could plant, perhaps even an experimental kitchen to develop new recipes, it was more than she had ever dreamed of. "Gregory, that's—" She couldn't finish, emotion choking her voice. He hugged her, understanding without words what it represented. Not just a house, but a symbol of permanence, of a future built on solid foundations. "We can make that place anything we want," he murmured against her hair. "A new beginning without shadows. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself," she whispered. "For showing me it was possible to start over." From the other side of the patisserie, Marianne called out, impatient for the promised truffles. The intimate moment was interrupted, but the feeling remained, alive and pulsating between them. As Constance returned to the counter to prepare a tray of sweets for the children, Gregory watched her with a mixture of admiration and gratitude. From an unthinkable tragedy, an unlikely family had been born, united not by blood or social conventions, but by conscious choices, by mutual respect, by a love built patiently day after day. In the corner of the patisserie, a small framed picture, the only visible sign of the past that had brought them together, displayed a simple phrase, handwritten by Constance: "From the ashes, rebirth." And so it was. From the ashes of a painful past, an entirely new life had blossomed. For Constance, for Gregory, for the children who now laughed carefree, protected by a love forged in the most difficult circumstances, and for that very reason, indestructible. As she served the chocolate truffles to the family she had built against all odds, Constance smiled, finally at peace. She had not just survived, she had triumphed. And this was only the beginning of a story that now belonged entirely to her. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Constance and Gregory has touched your hearts. To follow more emotional narratives like this one, we have prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking on the left of the screen. If this story has stirred emotions in you, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity of life, overcoming adversity, and new beginnings. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion is very important to us. Until the next story.